Welcome back. And just like that, we've officially crossed into the second hour of Good Morning Namibia this morning.
That's right. We will start off, that is, of course, in the town of Utapi in Umsati region. They are basically getting ready to host their first ever beauty business exhibition, and it will be taking place on the 2nd and the 3rd of August. Zanao Andoa, who is the founder of CH Growth Advertising, and she's also the organizer of the Beauty Business Exhibition 2025. She will be joining us in the studio to give us all the details.
They might not respond to change that come up. So one of the few areas that we can sort of identify is how do they communicate. In emotionally healthy families, they have open communication where family members openly share their feelings without the fear of being judged, without the fear of being punished. You know, growing up as a child, if you say, I guess we're depressed, as a child, you say, what do you have to be depressed about?
Yeah.
That is one of the things that struggling
What is
families
depressing you at that age?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. You're not allowed to feel these feelings. That's down the difference between healthy and struggling families. Another way would be the conflict resolutions, which I think is a big thing, you know, in something that was normalized in household. I don't know about yours, but when families have arguments or conflicts, they can go weeks without talking to each other and just be normal again.
Yeah.
That was something that was normalized. But in a healthy emotional family, they resolve conflicts. They make space to understand one another, to understand one another's feelings. And in struggling families, this is where unresolved conflict issues start to fester up. Resentment gets built up, blame gets placed, and it causes a disconnection from the family. And lastly would be empathy, the inability to put yourself in that person's shoes, not justifying it, but just saying, okay, I understand what you're going through, let's find a way to work together. So I think those are one of the main factors that we do need to sort of look at and identify and say, where can we do better as a family?
I'll be calling for family meetings. But for parents to realize that they are passing on unhealthy patterns, what are some of the first steps, that they should take? Sometimes people have this thing of saying, I know, it's an African parent, it's okay, we're raised like that, parents are supposed to be strict. But also, where do we draw the line between unhealthy and also just strict?
Yeah. That's a very good question. I love that question. So first of all, parents have a tendency to blame themselves for everything. But once you acknowledge, I would say that's the first step. You need to acknowledge where you went wrong. Also practicing self-compassion. Be kind to yourself while in the process of saying, okay, I've identified this pattern in me and I want to change it. I don't want to pass it on to my child. I don't want my child to cope with things the way that I'm coping. The second step would be educating yourself, learning about emotional intelligence, learning about parenting, exposing yourself to knowledge. I always say everything that you read gets transferred into knowledge. That knowledge is transferred into understanding, and that understanding is transferred into wisdom, something that you can apply. So it's very important to constantly educate yourself, constantly see, okay, what is emotional intelligence? What is emotional regulation? Do I understand what this concept means? And then I would say the third step would be starting small, starting to identify these specific patterns, starting to say, okay, I see this thing and I want to pinpoint this and I want to work on it. Starting small means just working on that one thing, focusing on that and not trying to change everything overnight, And then the last thing I would say is seeking support. Seeking support from a trusted friend, trusted family member, or even a counselor, therapist, because they can give you tools that you can also implement in your daily life.
Which brings me to my next question. So what are some of those tools? I'm taking advantage of the fact that we're speaking to you right now. What are some of the specific tools or perhaps strategies that you've seen in your line of work that are very effective to families in order to reset some of their emotional climate?
Absolutely. So one of the most effective ones I would say is the feelings check-in. It's a bit different from family meetings, but that's also one of the other tools that I want to mention. So the first thing would be having a feelings check-in. This can be daily or it can be a weekly ritual. This is simply where family members sit in with one another and they share one emotion or feeling that they're experiencing and why.
Yeah.
This teaches emotional vocabulary as well, teaching the children, let the young children sit there and hear what you're talking about, saying, okay, today I had a great day because I finished all my homework.
Yeah.
Or today I felt a bit frustrated because my boss was on my case. My boss didn't want to leave me alone.
Yeah.
This is also showing, okay, this is a sense of collaboration that is being built up. It's a sense of connection being built up. And also, I would say empathy is being built in that process as well. Second one would be active listening. This is a tool that we as therapists utilize a lot as well. I think it's one of the most important part of our jobs as well. But active listening is simply listening, not just hearing, but listening without interruption, listening without judgment, and listening without wanting to jump in and finding a solution. And the third one, I would say, we call it I statements. So I statements is taking responsibility for what you feel, communicating that to the person and saying, listen, I feel angry because this is what you did and I don't like that. So
Yeah.
that's just an example. Instead of saying, you always make me angry. Jy doen het altyd. You know, you're placing the blame on the next person, you know. And then family meetings. Family meetings are not very common, I would say, in our cultures or in our families. But I think it's quite an effective way of, you know, fostering that relationship, fostering that interactions with one another in the family, working together as one. Because that's the most important part, right, of being in a family. Family members has to be structured in terms of setting out a date. This is when we're going to have a family meeting. Prepare yourself. But family meetings are not just for discussing disagreements. It is also for celebrating each other.
True.
Celebrating achievements that you might have had in that week or in that month. And it fosters a sense of relationship with one another. It also shows that, okay, I want to work with this person. I want to tell my mom, I want to tell my sister, this is what happened, and I want them to be excited with me. So those are one of the tools that most of the tools that we really utilize in family counseling as well.
Yeah, but I think you'd agree with me when I say it takes a village to raise a child. You know, not only parents, but, you know, teachers, the people on the streets, you know. If a child is perhaps walking from school, all those people that are outside, perhaps just look at the child and, you know, escort him or her, you know, till home until he or she is there safe. And we've seen it so many times in the communities. But what role can extended families and also just members of the community play in either reinforcing or reshaping emotional habits within home? Because the child is picking up something else in the community at school from the teacher, you pick up something else from the community, the parents are doing, you know, something different at home. All of this, you know, just becomes a lot for the child. But how do we all meet each other at some point? Yeah.
I think one of the most important ways, before I answer the question, would be communicating with one another.
Yeah.
Many of the times, our older generation, our grandparents, they have a tendency of saying these things like, that's not the way we did it.
Yeah.
Dis hoe ek groot geraak het, you know. So they can, it's like a coin. There's a good side and there's a bad side to it as well. So the bad side would be grandparents or even older siblings would be like, okay, this is not the way that I did it. How can we sort of reinforce this old habit or this old existing pattern? How can we implement that again? This can sort of overpower or override the parents' role as well. Because many of the times parents, they do want to realize and they do want to work on it. But then if children also spend a lot of time with the grandparents, that is also where, you know, that differentiation, I would say, comes in. So they can reinforce these old ways. It might be unintentional or it might be intentional as well. Alternatively, they can model new ways of dealing with, we call it intergenerational healing.
Yeah.
They can also model new ways of dealing with, you know, all these different kind of emotional struggles that we face. For example, if my grandparents are fighting, I would see them go into the room, say, okay, I'm sorry for the way that I behaved, you know, but let your grandchild see this. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Let your grandchild see this. Let your child see you making up and repairing that relationship that was once a bit, you know, a bit rocky.
Yeah. And this is some of the things we hide from, you know, the kids. They wouldn't want to see, you know, but
Yes.
they see the arguments, but then they don't see the empathy after the
making
argument.
up.
Yeah, the making
Exactly.
up.
And that's one of the most important things, modeling and repair. I always say, model the behavior that you want to see. And this is a vital thing in parenthood as well, I would say. Because you set the foundation, you lay the foundation for how your child is going to grow up, how they will be emotionally, you know, trained. You set the foundation. That's quite a lot of responsibility placed on a parent. But it's quite important. So that is one of the few ways that grandparents or older siblings can, you know, either reinforce or reshape, you know, patterns, emotional patterns or emotional struggles. Yes.
Amazing. Well, before we let you go, Tamia, any final remarks?
Just that breaking a generational cycle is one of the most difficult things to do, but is one of the most freeing things to do as well. Because you see, this is what I'm investing into the next generation. This is what I'm putting into my child's life. And I think that's the beauty of it. That's the most beautiful thing that you can do. It's a gift that you can pass on to your children and to the next generation.
Amazing. Well, Tamia, thank you so much for talking to us this morning. We definitely heard you, and we'll start those family meetings. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Good morning. Namibia continues after this. Don't go anywhere.